Hey, thanks for tuning in to this week's nutrition information video. It is Wednesday, and that means it's time for me to tell you a little bit more about nutrition and give you some nutrition tips you can use. So let's just get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about nutrition science because believe it or not, it's really a rather young science. Did you know that the first vitamin was isolated and defined in 1926? And that's less than 100 years ago. Now, that may seem like a really long time, but there are other sciences that are much, much older than nutrition. The event of discovering this single vitamin ushered in a whole half century of discovery of focusing on single nutrient deficiencies, including things like beriberi, rickets, and scurvy. Research on the role of nutrition in complex diseases, however, such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, and cancer, is even more recent. It's really only been in the last 2 or 3 decades that it's been happening rather quickly. And most of the research was actually done after the start of the 21st century. So it's really new. I find the history of nutrition rather fascinating, so I want to share with you a bit of it. Casimir Funk in 1913 came up with the ideal of a vital amine in food. And this idea originated from his observation that when chickens were given a fully unprocessed rice to eat, that it worked against a condition that was very much like beriberi, as opposed to when they were given a stripped rice that was lacking the hull. This vital amine or vitamin then was isolated in 1926 and named thiamine, and we also know it as vitamin B1. By the middle of the 20th century, all the major vitamins had been isolated and synthesized. The chemical synthesis of vitamins quickly progressed to food-based strategies, being replaced by the treatment with individual vitamin supplements instead of whole foods. As an example, when they discovered that that there was a compound in fruit that prevented scurvy, they didn't even know its name. Of course, they focused on putting citrus fruits on ships for those long journeys across the sea. But once vitamin C was isolated, then the world turned to a supplement to prevent scurvy. So this focus on individual nutrients led to modern day marketing of individual and bundled multivitamins to guard against deficiencies. And this launched an entire vitamin supplement industry with sales that exceeded $5 billion last year alone. The new science of single nutrient deficiency diseases also led to the fortification of select staples that we used as food. These included iodine in salt, niacin and iron in wheat and cereal products, and vitamins D and A in milk. It also included later on folic acid in ready-to-eat cereals. In 1941, the first recommended dietary allowances were announced, and they focused specifically on preventing nutritional deficiencies. Now, with accelerated economic development and modernization of agriculture, food processing, food formulation techniques, it continued to reduce single nutrient deficiencies in the United States, but also globally. In addition, coronary heart deaths began to fall in high-income countries. But at the same time, diet-related chronic diseases were increasing in industrialized nations. These chronic diseases include obesity, type 2 diabetes, and several types of cancer. The 1980 dietary guidelines for Americans looked at preventing chronic diseases, but only by focusing on individual nutrients. Well, that was all well and good, but nutrition science has expanded beyond the idea of single nutrients and their individual role in health and disease. Scientific advances suggest that single nutrient theories are inadequate to explain the many effects of diet on non-communicable diseases. And after decades of focus on simple and reductionist metrics such as dietary fat, saturated fat, nutrient density, energy density, the true emerging complexities of different foods and diet patterns are creating genuine challenges for understanding how diet influences your health and your well-being. Now, in 2015, and that's the most recent published dietary guidelines for Americans, those guidelines focus solely on foods rather than individual nutrients. So we are progressing. Now, the 2020 dietary guidelines, because they are updated every 5 years, are in their final review and they will be published shortly. So we'll see what comes out. But certainly the focus will be more on whole foods than preventing individual nutrient deficiencies. So let me give you some examples on why the focus on whole foods is so important. We know that people who eat plants rich in beta-carotene, like carrots and sweet potatoes, have low rates of heart disease and cancer. However, isolated beta-carotene not only does not prevent cancer, but in smokers, people given doses of isolated beta-carotene had a higher risk of lung cancer. Another example is the conundrum surrounding the fortifications of cereals with folic acid. Though doing so helped reduce neurological problems in growing children, there has been an increased concern about the safety of this fortification, because it's found that this fortification might make worse neurological and cognitive deficit among people who have low levels of vitamin B12. And those are just two examples where an individual isolated nutrient is not as valuable as when it comes from whole foods. So if we shouldn't focus on preventing deficiencies, where should our focus be placed? The answer to this question is the whole foods matrix. And I will address that in more detail in next week's episode. I hope you'll tune in for that additional information on why whole foods make a difference in your diet and why taking supplements may not be right for everyone. I hope you have a great day. I thank you for tuning in and watching this entire video. And please share these videos with people you know and love who might be interested in improving their health through nutrition. And if you ever have any questions, please put them in the comment fields and I will try to address the answer to your questions in future episodes. Thanks for listening. See you next week.